Hi friends, continuing to the chapter The Prohibit of Yon Ode. It was clear which one was the back bedroom. Its window looked out over the backyard. She saw no ghost in that room, but through the window she saw Groover, who was probably waiting for his father. He was walking along the low wall that bordered the concrete terrace and crouching down every now and then to study the ground, maybe looking for more creatures to capture. She waited, watching him for a minute. He was definitely a good looking. She liked the springy way he moved, and his floppy hair more or less covered up his sticking out ears. She couldn't fall in love with him, of course, because of her snakes and the boy baby mouse. But but she decided to go down and talk to him again anyhow. When Grover saw her come outside, he beckoned to her, and she went over to him. Listen, he said in an urgent whisper. I want to show you something amazing. No human eyes had ever lived on it before. Nicky was weary. It is about the snakes. No, no, said Grover. I told you no one has ever seen this. Not even you. Not even me. Well, what is that? Nicky said. Grover reached into his lunch bag and brought out a small green apple. I have seen the apples before, Nicky said. Yet, but watch this. Grover took out his pocket knife, put the blade out, and sliced the apple in half the middle. He pointed out to the inside, the white flesh oozing juice, the five little seeds in a star shaped. I have seen that too, said Nicky. No, you haven't, Gruen said. No one has. Not a single person had ever seen the inside of this apple until now. It is completely a new sight to the human eyes. He took a big bite out on one half of an apple and stood there chewing, with a wide, satisfying smile across his face. Oh, you think you are so clever, Nicky said. She grabbed the other half of an apple out of his hand. She was annoyed to be trickstered, but she couldn't help smiling a little too. What he had said was true. After all, an idea popped into her head. I know something you have never seen before, she said. No human eyes have ever seen it, or ever will see it. That doesn't make sense, said Grover, munching on his apple. Yes, it does. I will show you. But if you show me, then I will have seen it. No, you won't, said Nicky. Just wait here. I will go and get it. She ran inside, went to her bedroom, and came back out clinching a piece of paper. She held it out. Do you know that? What this is? Grover breezed at it. It is some a fake monsters out of an science fiction movie, he said. No, said Nicky. It was a dust mite. In this picture, it is magnified many zillion times. You will never see it in a real life because it is smaller than the eyes you can see. Ha, said the Grover. He looked up at her and quite an eyebrow. Where did you get it? I cut it out of the magazine. I like the strange, interesting things. You don't like the strange snakes, though, Grover said. Probably you are afraid of them. I am not. You would have never want to see a snake eat a mouse. Maybe I would. As soon as she said this, she realized it was true. It would be an horrible thing to do, but interesting, and it might help her decide if there was something evil about this boy or not. Really, Grover looked surprised. Really? I don't believe you. You are just saying that to sound big. This is somewhat true, but Nicky wasn't going to admit it. Just tell me when, she said. I will come and see it. So he said that she should come the next day about 3:30, and he told her how to get into the houses. Just in a time she remembered not to say that she has already knew where he lived. Crystal got back around 5. She came into the front door, her cheeks red with the cold and her eyes sparkling, talking and talking about the lovely scenery in the surrounding hills. This is really gorgeous area, she said. I had such a wonderful time. Good, said Nicky. Not really interesting. And then told me something interesting that about the yarn wood. Crystal said. A woman here had has had some kind of an religious experiences apparently. People think it meant the Yon Woods is a sort of an chosen place and they will be safe even if they were worse. Nicky started paying a closer attention. Does Ling think that? He does know what to think, Crystal said, flinging a coat on her chair. He was in a school with his prohibit person. She was a shy, bookish little girl, he said, not the type to grab for attention. So he thinks maybe what happening to her was real. Have you heard anything about it? A little Nicky said, trying to look uninterested. Tomorrow, said the crystal, I'm going to have a hair done at local beauty shop. I will probably come out looking like a dangitan, but at least that will be better than this mess. She swatted at her bangs. Good idea, said Nicky. She thought that Crystal looks fine as she was. After that, Crystal went on. I am going to Archville for some shoppings now. I don't suppose you want to come. No, Nicky said. I don't want to come. What are you going to do? Oh, nothing much, Nicky said. She didn't think it was a good idea to mention the snakes or the mice. You are such a good girl, Crystal said. All this time is on your own and you never get bored or get into trouble. It's amazing. Nicky just smiled. Up to the woods. A few times during the next day, which was Monday, Gru would find himself thinking about Nicky as he sat in his desk at the school. He wasn't thinking about her in a boy girl sort of a way. The notion of being in love never entered his mind. He was thinking about her in an interesting person sort of a way. It wasn't often that he met anybody, especially a girl, who cared about the things like dust mites. He was looking forward to the showering her in his snakes later on. After the schools, it might be fun to see if she was cat after all. But first, he had to do some haunting. Just before 2 o'clock, he will fill in the last answers on his English test and then stage a high, realistic couching fit. Can't breathe, nurse office, he gasps, and he staggered, chalking out of the classroom. Then he slipped out a side door and dropped up Fern Street to the path that leads into the wood. The forest was in his second home. He knew all the trails that threatened up the mountain side. He knew the creeks and the outcroppings of a rock and the places where the slamders were likely to be hiding under the rotting logs. In the summer, he spent hours up here. Sometimes he scrambled through the brush and waded down the streams, but other times he just found a good spot and sat still. He had learned that if he sat without moving for a long time, he would see the things. Animals would come out from their hiding places and potter around in the open, not realizing that he was there. Once at a dusk on a summer evening, a spotted skunk walked past him, so close he could see the long, curled nails on its front feet. Today he was after some dinner for his red belly snake. The milk snake would get the baby mouse, which he was trying to keep alive so that the Nicky could watch it being eaten. For the red belly, a few good sized slugs and maybe a smaller salamander would do. Actually, he could get these in his own backyards pretty easy, but he wanted to go into the woods. He hadn't been for a while because of a homework and the bad weather and working on the job with his father. He missed it. He was aware that the people had been talking lately about someone lurking up there, maybe a terrorist planning a dark deeds. But Groover wasn't worried about him. He didn't think about him much. Talk about a terrorist and the wars was a sort of a talk that just slid off his brain. He was too occupied with his own concerns to pay much attention to it. He started along a steep uphill trail which would take him in 15 minutes or so to a place where the stream rushed between the shallow banks. He could get down to the water edge easily there and find a new place of things that he liked living in a damp places. He would brought a plastic jar with him to take them home in. The rhythm of his steps said, "Happy to be here, happy to be here." Rays of sunlight shot between the clouds, making the spot of a light like polka dot on the ground. On either sides, the wood were thick, everything close in and dense, sticky, twinkled with the wine here, and there were a bare, twiggered mountain ashes with the red berries like the decorations. The whir of a bird's wings rushed up from the bushes as he passed. He was always looking beside the trails, which grew a narrow as he climbed higher, for the holes and the burrows that an animal might be in living in. Hotels, rattling logs, sun-warmed rocks, all those were paced forward by the snakes and therefore favored by the groovers. As he walked, he humbled a tiny tune, an ambling, careless tune that went with being happy and toddling along, knowing what he was doing, and his eyes scanned the woods and the ground for anything of the interest, and his mind traveled off where it usually did, to his plan to join an arrowhead wilderness reptiles exhibiting this summer. It was perfect for him. Addition Puff, a famous pterophologist, was leading it, and it was out in Arizona. He had been never been, and where the snakes would be all different from the one here. He would have a great time. He would learn a huge amount, and he would meet the people who could help him on the way of his career. He had to go. How could something as a trivial as a $375 stand in a way? It is very inconvenient that his family didn't have any spare money. On the other hand, it has forced him to be creative. He felt pretty confident about the serial jingle he had made up, and he had solved the spectrogram and sent it in quickly. Sweep takes weren't so promising because winning was just the luck, but he had entered so many of them, at least 50 just in the last few weeks, that he had to win something. It wouldn't take much. That he had to win something. Just a few small prizes from 3 or 4 different contests, and he had had enough. All these thoughts thrilling through his mind kept him a little less observant than he usually was. He was up fairly high on the mountainside now, and the trail turned into an more of an dotted line up here, blocked everyone now and then by a overgrown bushes or a fallen trees. This didn't matter to the groover. He climbed over and went around whatever was in the way. He was always knew where he was, but it meant that he had to watch his feet more, stepping over the stuff and being careful not to trip. So at the first he didn't see that something was moving farther up the mountainside where the trees were denser. The sound of his own step covered up by the sound that anyone else's footstep might have made. A few yards farther on, he came to a place where a muddy path led down the stream bank to the place he wanted to go. And there he paused for a second. That was when he heard a distant rustling, a sort of a rustling that only something big makes. He is froze. Without moving any other part of himself, he turned his head towards where the sound seems to have come from. The trees and the thick undergrowth beneath that made it impossible to see very far, or at least to see clearly. All he could see was a patch of an plainness far off in the distance. It moved, paused, moved again, and disappeared. He stood still for another 3 or 4 minutes, but he heard no more rustling and saw nothing either. So he went on down the stream bank and sat on a rock by the water. Nothing large and pale lived in the wood, so as far he knew. He couldn't think that what could be possibly be. Maybe some huge white birds, a straw. But why would be there a straw in this wood? They won't, wouldn't not. A ghost. He didn't believe in ghosts. Anyway, a ghost wouldn't make a rustle sound, would it? So maybe the talk about someone learning up here was worth paying attention to after all. Glover felt a small shiver of fear. Maybe this terrorist was up here just waiting for someone to kidnap. Give me $1 million to found my terrorist organization, or else I will slice this boy up and shatter him in the pines. Grover put his arms across his knees and hunched down, bending his face towards the water. The stream rushed by, carrying leaves and a bit of a twig, making the weeds at the water edge flow sideways. He stayed in the way for a while, imagining what he would do if a terrorist stepped suddenly from behind a tree and grabbed him. The best thing would be to have a snake with him at this time, so he could terrify the terrorist with it and startle him into letting go. A venomous snake would be the best. If he didn't happen to have a snake, he have to get to struggle. Too bad he didn't know karate or any other of an other martial arts. He could kick though. He was strong and agile, and he wouldn't bite. He pictured himself twisting like a Jane boa consider around the terrorist and biting him in the back of a neck. If it would be the best, though, not to be get caught in the first place. So he got busy with what he had come for. He turned over the rocks, dug the toes of his shoes into an climbing logs, lifted up a sodden leafer litter, and poked the sticks into the holes. Before long, he had some nice grubs, a million a mildew five-star snails, two good-sized slugs, and a small purplish salamander with a golden spot on its back. He put these all in a jar and started down the trail. The snake's dinner. Shortly before 3:30, Nikki set out for Grover's house. She has been it back from the back, at least a glimpse of it beyond the shed and the fruit trees. But now she saw the front for the first time. It was one-story yellow houses with the two battered tricycles standing out in the yard and these saggy steps leading up to the porch. On the porch was a couch covered in a green material, worn almost to a white on set and arms, and on a couch sat a very old woman wearing a red house dress with a zipper up the front and a baggy lavender sweater. As Nikki came up the walk, the woman preached at her. "You are not from here," she said. "No," said Nikki, "I'm just visiting." The old woman nodded. She was wearing, Nikki noticed, yellow bedroom slippers with a duck on the toes. "I'm looking for Grover," Nikki said, but Grover must have seen her coming. The door opened, and there he was. "You did come," he said, amazing. "Got yourself a girlfriend," the old woman said to the Grover. "She isn't my girlfriend, Granny," Grover said, "just a girl." Inside the house was dim and uncovered. The TV was on. It was the president announcing that only 4 days remained before the deadline he had set for the Flanax Nation. But no one was paying attention. The living room was full of sagging furniture, and every piece of furniture seems to have a child climbing on it, or curled upon it, or crawling out from the under it. They all stared at Nikki's when she came in. "My brothers and sisters," Grover said, waving a hand at them. "How many are there?" Nikki asked, spotting another one plodding up the hall. "6, the twin of the 4 more. Plus me, I'm the oldest." He led her down on a short hall that went right to the house. The walls were covered with a photograph. School pictures, wedding pictures, baby pictures, some in a frame and some stuck up in the tabs. They went out to the back door and Grover led away across the sloping yard, over the dead grasses and the brown rain-plastered leaves between the granule trunks of a fruit trees, down to the shed beside the alley. Nikki began to feel nervous. Her stomach clenched. Grover trickled the dial of a combination lock on the latch and opened the shed door. She followed him in. The air had an earthly smell. A few garden a few garden tools, mostly broken, hung on the hooks on the wall. One on a shelf across the one wall were the 2 snake tanks, and on the other shelves and on the floor and on a small table and on a chair lay piles and piles of an magazines and flattered the several boxes, soap boxes and the cake mix boxes. The whole mess was sprinkled here and there with the little bits of an bent cardboard. What is all that? Nicky asked. Contest, said Groover. Sweepstakes, lottery, tickets, stuff like that. There is a gob of dollars out there being given away. I entered everything I can find. Why? Because I need money. Obviously, he made how can be such an modern face at her. I was to go on an Arrowhead Wilderness Reptile Expedition this summer, which cost in $325, and I don't have. So I am going to win it. People hardly ever win the contest. Nikki say that I don't know anyone who has. Well, you will pretty soon. Grover said, look at this one. He held up a page torn from the magazine. You write on a paragraph, no more than 100 words. Say, my Armstrong pickles are the best. Want to hear my paragraph? Okay, said Nikki. She glanced uneasily at the two glass tanks on the shelf, but she didn't see anything inside, only dry leaves. Groover rummaged around on the table and gave up a sheet of an binder paper. He read, last Sunday night I was studying for my maths test. It was late and was tired. My eyes kept closing so I couldn't see the numbers in my book. I thought, how am I going to pass this test? If I can't stay awake, then the impression hits me. I need an Armstrong pickle. I just jumped up from my chair and ran to the refrigerator. I pulled one of these big green pimky pickle out of the jar. The first cool bite made my brain go zing, and the next I got an A on the test. Groove looked up, grunting only 98 words. Nikki laughed. It is great, she said. What do you get if you win? You will get $500 plus a whole free crack of an pickle, said Groover. There is all kind of uncommon test. Once you think about a slogan and once you have make as many words as you can come out of an product name and once where you solve an cryptogram and have you owned any of them yet? Nikki asked. Oh yeah, said Grover. I want 6 free boxes of an old Snickers and I want a branch of an coupons for the Rossville laundry shop. Just no money yet, but that will come. He turned to the snakes. All right, he said. Time to get down to the business. First, the milk snake. He hasn't eaten for a few weeks. A few weeks? Yeah. They don't eat much in the winter. Snakes out in the wild across her crawl down underwood and hardly eat at all the till springs. Hey, you know what I saw when I was up in the mountains looking for a snake food? What? I saw the terrorist, the one who broke the restaurant window. You did? We are not. Weren't you scared? Nah. He was far away, big, tough, huge, and was just a glimpse of him. Grover took off the one of his tanks. Inside it, the snake sniffed, lifting it at the head and then more and more of itself from the dark and the dry leaves that covered it. Ring of an black, yellow, and reddish brown striped its long body. It doesn't looks like a bit like a milk, Nicky said. I knew it, said Grover, gazing fondly at the snake. It is called that because people used to find them in their brands and think that they could come to milk the cows. From a small cupboard box next to the snake tank, he took out the tiny mouses he had shown Nicky before. It was a pink and wet looking with a tiny head and a bulky bluish eyes, and a tiny legs with a tiny toes like the fringe at the ends. It was moving slightly in the Grover's palm, but it looks limp and weak. Bye bye, baby, Grover said. He picked up a long pair of tongues, the kind people used to turn the meat on the barbecue hills. His teasing manner was gone now. He moved carefully. All his attention was on what he was doing. He grips the tiny mouse with a tongue and waved it back and forth before the snake's head. The snake lifted the front half of its body into the air. Its tongue flicked it and out. I don't know, said Nicky. Maybe I do not want to watch. But it was too late. The snake staked out and snatched the mouse. It withdrew it into the tank and wrapped a coil of itself around the mouse's body to hold it still. And then it opened its mouth extremely wide and began to snuff the mouse heads into it. They ate they always ate things the head first, Grover remarked, and they have an expandable jaws. Nicky froze in horror, but she couldn't take her eyes away. It looks only a few seconds for the pink body of the mouse will still wriggling to disappear down the snake's throat. For a second, a bit of a tail hung over the snake's lower jaw. Then the whole mouse was gone. The snake stretched out on the sand again. Behind its head was a mouse-sized bird. Nicky breathed out. She hasn't realized she had been holding her breath. She felt like ill. It is horrible, she said. Not really, said Groover. It is how the snake lives. If I didn't give him a mouse, he caught on himself. How can you stand to do it? The poor little mouse. Groover shuddered. It's nature, he said. Nature likes the snake just as much as the mouse. I guess so, Nicky said. Well, that's it, said Groover. He set down the tanks and put the lid back on the tanks. At least you didn't faint. I have never fainted, said Nicky. She felt upset somewhere between the sick and anger. Want to see the red Billy eat? No, it is too weird. It is not weird at all, Groover retorted. It happens every day, 100 of the times. If you want to see something really weird, go over to Hot York House. In the middle of a night, he cracks the sky open and saw it. Come on, said Nicky, you're making that up. No, I really saw it. A long, skinny line in the sky. He is doing something weird over there. Maybe he is sending signal to an enemy nation. Or he opens the sky and the aliens and the demons ooze through. Groover wingled his finger in a creepy, oozing way. Nicky just shook her head. With the Groover, she didn't know how to tell the difference between the truth and kidding. I have to go now, she said. So Groover led her back across the yard and into the house, down the hall among the toddlers, and out on the front porch where the grandmother was still sitting on an old couch. Going already, the old woman said. I showed her the milk snake, said Groover. No wonder she is leaving in a hurry. Fed him his dinner, said Groover. It was a gorge some, Nicky said. No kidding, said the grandma. She eyes Nicky with an interest. You are going to introduce me to this young lady? She asked Groover. This is my grandmother, Carrie Haltwell. Groover said hi to Nicky. We just call her Granny Carrie. He turned to his grandmother, and this is Nicky, he said. Nickel Rantlord, said Nicky. My great-grandfather lived there. His name is Arthur Green. Ha, the grandmother said. He was on the side of an Angus. Nicky wasn't sure what this meant, but it sounded all right. She said goodbye and walked back out to the street. Her left felt shaggy, and her mouth crunched. Was it good? She wondered. To feed a baby mouse to a snake. It wasn't good for the mouse, but it was for the snake. Was it evil for Groover to do it? She just didn't know. Hot Michael's horrible houses. Nicky headed backward towards the green heaven by the way of an Raven road. She didn't really plan to go that way. Her mind was on what she had just seen in the Grover's shed, but she found herself passing the gravel drive through the lead back into an hot Michael's over green acres. She hesitated. She thought about what Groover had said. That hot Mikey croaked open the sky. Surely that couldn't be true. But whatever she had seen might have been a sign of an wickedness. Mrs. Beeson thought there was something strange about this man, that he was probably a trouble spot, and Nicky had promised to help her. So maybe while she was there, she should check out an haughty Mycock. She didn't really want to. Even her strong curiosity didn't expand to creepy, isolated houses and the people with a whiff of an wrongness about them. But if she was going to do her part to root out the badness so that the goodness could win, she had to be brave. She gripped her teeth and took a deep, shaggy breath. She would just dart in and have a quick look around, hoping to see something that would let her take back a clear report to Mr. Beeson. She started up the driveway. Brown, slivered blackberry vines grew along the edges. Weeds sprouted up through the gravel. Tall pine trees on the left cast a spiky lines of an shadow, and Nikki stayed with these shadows as much as she could. She rounded a curve and there, up ahead, and was the house, a mud-colored two-story building, tucked back among the great looming oaks and pines. Its paint worn off, drifts of an old leaves on its peaked roof. She stopped and looked for a sign of a moment. Three birds shoot up from a slunk of an grass, but other than that, she saw nothing stirring, either outside the house or behind its window. So casually she moved forward again. What was she looking for? She didn't really know. Something truly awful, like the freshly dug graves or a human bones, sign of an graciness, like the hot Mikey dancing around naked, disgusting filthiness, like a smelly outhouse or a rat vamped garbage. She didn't see anything like that. Nothing but a dusky black car parked at the head of the drive. Maybe a bad thing happening inside the dark, silent house, but she certainly wasn't going to go close enough to peer in the windows. She would go up to the beginning of a brick path that leads to the front door. She decided, and if she didn't see anything notable by then, she would leave. So she crept away from the protective shadows of the tree and tiptoed across the open space in the front of a house. She stood at the foot of a path. Her gaze scanned the front door, the windows to the left and the right of the front door, heavily curtained, the window on the second floor, where the blinds were closed, and a window in a gable above them where she took a sudden step backward, and her knees went weak. The barrel of a gun pointed at the sky, and as she stood therefore, frozen with the fear, the gun angled towards until it aimed straight at her. From inside the house, a voice called out, "Stop right there. Trespassers endure, spy. Don't move or pan to dread consequence." But Nikki was not going to stand there and get shot. She dashed towards the shadow of a tree as fast as her jelly like legs would carry her. Any second she expected to hear a bang and feel the punch of a shot between her shoulder's blade. At the edge of a driveway, she stumbled and fell, and she lay there for a second, shaking and looking back at the house. The gun was still pointing downwards, but no one was shouting. No one was coming out the front door. So she staggered to her feet again. This time her legs worked, and she ran. She knew Crystal wouldn't be home yet, so she ran straight to Mrs. Beeson's house, leapt up the step, and rang the doorbell. When Mrs. Beeson answered, Nikki was breathing so hard she could barely speak. "Mrs. Beeson," she gasped, "that is my key man tried to shoot me." Mrs. Beeson's eye grew so wide that the whites showed all the way around. "What, shoot you?" Nikki told about the gun pointing out of her window and the voice that had been bluewood at her. "Oh," Mrs. Beeson grabs Nikki by the arm and pulled her inside. "This is even worse than I thought. I must get the police, must get them out there right now." She hurried away down the hall, leaving Nikki quivering by the door. In a moment, Nikki heard her speaking to someone over the phone. "Raven Road," she said. "Yes, Mickey, be careful. He has the guns. I will meet you out there." When she came back, she was pulling on her coats. "We will bring him in," she said. "Don't worry. Your poor, brave little things." She gave Nikki a quick, sweating smell hug. "I should have known that feeling I had. Why didn't I?" She clasped her hands and took a deep breath. Slow down, Brenda, she told herself. Be calm. But Nikki wasn't calm at all. She was terribly excited. There is more, she said. The boy with the snakes, he feeds them like a baby mice, and the terrorist up in the woods. He saw him, and he told me that the Hawkid Meccord cracks the sky open and send a signal to the enemy nations. Mrs. Beeson snatched her purse from a table by the door. I have to get out this right away, she said. You go back home now and keep yourself safe. Who knows, he might be. But we will get him. Don't worry. I will come and talk to you when it is all over. Nikki went back to the Green Heaven, wishing for one that the crystal was around and so could tell her about what had happened. But the only sign of a crystal was note she had left on the hall table by the phone. Nikki, your mom called. Sounded pretty tired and worried. Another postcard came from your dad. It said, Dear Nikki and Rachel, everything here is going well. We are working hard and making a good progress. I hope both of you taking in excellence care of yourself. Love, Dad. P.S. stayed up till midnight last night reading the Shakespeare. I didn't know your dad read Shakespeare's back by the dinner time. See, I didn't know he did either, Nikki thought. There was something odd about these postcards. She needed to think about them. Was he trying to send a message of the same kind? He had always liked the codes and the puzzles. He had explained a lot of and different ones to Nikki, and they had a fun working on them together. Could these postcards be in a code? She went up to the nursery and laid the 3 postcard messages in a row on a window seat. She studied for a while, but if they were in a code, she could figure it out. So she gave up for a moment and played with an artist for a long time. His happy spirit made her feel better. Everything about him made her feel better. In fact, his damp black noses, the way the watery hair grows on the top of his head, the 5 little pads of him unbuttoned on his feet, even his doggy smell. They played all over their favorite games, and Nikki pounded her father's old messages and thought of horrible Hawkwood gradually faded from her mind. What is Grover saw? Something was going on at Hot Maker. Grover, who was out by the street getting the mail just before the dinner time, saw 2 cars, one of them a police car, streaking down the Trillium Street and veering left up the Raven Road. And of course, he followed to see where they were going. They turned into an Hosty driveway. That were going. They turned in an Hotty's driveway. Obviously, they weren't just stopping for a friendly visit. They were going fast. The wheel skidded on the driveway gravel. Hey, Hottie had a heart attack or something. Had he had, maybe shot himself in the foot with that rifle on his. Maybe he had shot someone else that they were going to arrest him. Whatever was happening, Grover had to see it. He ran up an Hoddie's driveway in the way of a car and stepped into among the some trees at the side of the tribes so he could watch without being seen. Both cars had pulled up in the open space in the front of Hottie's awful looking house, and from the sprang Yarnwood, the policeman and Mrs. Brenda Beeson. The cops had taken their guns from their hostler and were pointing them at the front door of the house. The chief officer, Granny, roared in his chest deep voices. Hoyt Myco, come out with your hands up. We have your surrendered. Actually, they didn't have him surrendered. They were all in the front of a house. But when Granny said that a couple of police scurried around to the back, Mrs. Beeson, in her red baseball cap, stood behind the other 2. Her fists were clenched at her side, her nose slightly wrinkled as if she were sniffing the air, and her eyes fixed like searching light beams on the front door of the houses. In a moment, the door opened. The tall, stooped figure of an Hoycott man appeared. He had on a baggy olive green sweater and a black pants, and his shabby haircuts stuck together in the bushes as if he hadn't combed in for several weeks. Hands up, yelled the officer Granny. Who must he have learned his line? Grover thought from watching the cops shows on TV. But Hoyt did not put his hands up. He came out on his front step and stared at the crowd in the driveway as if he thought he must have been a nightmare. Then he raised one hand, but not in surrender. He pointed a finger straight at an office granny. Off my property, he shouted. All of you out. What do you think you are doing here? You are under arrest, yelled the officer granny. Although he didn't take a step closer to Hoyt, attempted murder. At this, Hoyt lowered his arm and smiled. Grover crept a little slower to make sure. Yes, he was smiling, a strange look on that long, bloodhouse faces of his. He smiled and shook his head slowly. He came down his first front step and approached the officer Granny, apparently not worried that he was about to be shot. Granny raised his other arm and took hold of his gun with both the hands, as if a tank or an enraged rhinoceros were charging at him. Officers, said Hoyt, a mistake has been made, and I see the courses of it standing just behind you. He nodded at Mrs. Beeson. You didn't move. For some reason, this lady is determined to haunt me. She sent her spies to trespass on my land. Now she accuses me of murder, which is so ludicrous that I can only smile. He smiled again and again, a thin, grim smile that had no humor in it. Mr. Beeson stepped forward, and a Grover stepped forward too, to hear what she was going to say. It didn't seem to matter if he came out a little from among the trees. No one was paying any attention to him. Attempted murder, Mr. Beeson said in a voice that quavered with outrage. I have always known that you were a bad one, but now we have found you out before you could. Attempt murder on whom, madam? Said Hoyt. A child, a little girl who had stepped onto your land and was perfectly innocent, grazing at your dreadful. Now wait just a moment, dear lady, Hoyt said. He smiled, vanished. His face grew dark with anger. This is really too much. Lately my estate has been travelled with the Powlers. A boy and a girl had no doubt other I have not spotted. Grover knew who the boy Plower had been, but who was that girl? He didn't know any girls who would even think of setting foot on Howard's Myco land. Howard railed on. Why a person would like to know why? I happen to be instantly busy at the moment, busy with the matters of an great importance, matters that could alter the world's future. And yours, madam, and you have sent your spices to pester me. He shook his finger at Mrs. Beeson, and when I called out at them, when I rightfully demanded that they leave the premises, I am accused too of an attempt murder. It is quite beyond the belief. All this time, the police remained in a half crouching position, like runner at the start of a race, ready at any seconds to leap forward and wrestle Hot Moyot to the ground. Hoyt didn't seem to be alarmed by this. He glared straight past them and fixed his eyes on Mrs. Beeson. She glared back. You trained a rifle on a little girl, said Mrs. Beeson in a breathless, furious voice. A rifle? She saw it, and she saw you lower it to the point straight at her. She heard you. You threatened her. You hear she seems to run out of both the words and breathe. Her face was as red as her cap. Officer Granny took a bold stride forward. Come quietly now, he said to Hottie. We are taking you in. But an expression of a great amusement slowly spread across the Hoyt face. Ha, he said, ignoring the granny. Now I understand. Look up there, ladies and gentlemen. He is pointing upward and backward over his shoulder. There is your murder weapon. Grover looked up. So did the cops, and so did Mr. Beeson. In a gable window about the second story, a barrel of a rifle pointed at the sky. At least it looks to the Grover like a rifle, although it was bigger than the rifle his father had, and his shape was slightly different. Maybe it is actually a gunshot. That would explain why it was pointed at the sky. Hoyt was using it to the shot bird when he wasn't shooting trespassers. That said, the Hoyas is not a gun. That is the telescope in which I scanned the skies. He turned back to the glare at Mrs. Beeson again, and also scanned my property for the trespassers. I wish to be left alone, but you, Brenda Beeson, send one spy after the another. Why? Why can't a person be left in a peace? It was interesting moment. Groover held his breath, waiting to hear what Mr. Beeson and her men would say. Everyone waited. Mr. Beeson too seems to be waiting, perhaps for a clue from the god. Groover could see her face tightening, eyes narrowing, forehead flowering. Really? He thought she ought to be revealed. She ought to be saying, "Oh, good, no crimes have taken place after all. My mistake, very sorry." Instead, she told the officers Granny to take one of his men and go upstairs to make sure that haughty Maiko was telling the truth. A look around you as you go, she added, in a case you know there might be. Absolutely, said the officer's Granny. What? Cried out Hawkett. You assume you may come barging into my house without a search warrant. It is a matter of security, Officer Granny said. In the time like this, a threat to your security changes the role. Out courtesies, said the haughty, but I won't take the trouble to stop you. You will find nothing in my house that has the fascinated whiff of criminality. He went inside with the two men, and they were gone for about 15 minutes. A very boring 15 minutes for Grover, who didn't want to draw the attention to himself by walking away. The cold from the ground was seeing up in his feet. Mrs. Beeson got into her car and sat there waiting. She looked across and wondered, and as if she was the suspect about to be taken in. Grover thought it was an rather funny. He didn't really favor one side over the other in this dispute. He hadn't enjoyed being held up at Scary and suckered by the haughty Maiko the day he had crossed his property, but he didn't care much for Mr. Beeson either. These days she was seeing something wicked everywhere she looked. The police came out of the house finally, and Hood stood on his step with his hands on his hips and watched them dramatically as they got back into their cars. Your timing was excellent, he said. If you had come tomorrow, you would not have found me here, as I am going to go out away for a few days on a mission of more importance than you can imagine. You might have tried to interfere with my trips, which would have been a very bad decision. As it is, we have got this little matter out of the way, and I hope never to have the pleasure of your company here again. The men weren't bothering to listen to him. Weirdest place I have ever seen. Grover heard Officer's Granny say before she slammed the car door. Messias too, the guy a nutcase. The car started up their engines and drove off down the driveway. Haughty stood where he was, watching until both the cars have turned onto the Ravens Road. Grover waited for him to go back inside, but he kept standing there, and finally Grover realizes that Haughty was looking right at him. I see my trespassers is back, Woody said. He was no anger in his tone. I'm leaving, said Grover. I just wanted to see what is going on. Since you are here, said Howard, let me tell you something. Ha, though the Grover. Now I get yelled at, but he stood in his ground. At least no one was shooting at him. Howard came down the step, stalked over to Grover, and stood right in front of him. They were a grease stain on his sweater, Grover noticed, and his pants were unraveling at the scuffs. He smelled like a burnt toast. What Lady Brenda doesn't not, Toddy said, is that has the wrong information. Heaven is my territory. I know what goes on there. I know what was the universe has in the store for us. You do, said Grover. Not being yelled at surprised him. so much that he answered as if they were having a normal conversation, as well as anyone, said Howard. Well, said Grover, what does the universe have in the store? Caesar's marvels, said Hoyt, infinite astonishment, but only for those who care to pay attention. I saw a crack of a light over your house, Grover said. Ha, said Coyote. He narrowed his eyes and looked hard at Grover. Never mind about that, he said. Why, said Grover, it is secret. Haughty Michael ignored his question. If you were to simple rang my doorbell like a civilized person instead of sneaking around my property, I might show you the few things. Amusing you were interested. But Grover wasn't nearly interested enough for that. Maybe sometime, he said. But right now I have to go. He moved backward a few steps. Let me tell you one thing more, said Hoyes, raising his voice. You may tell this to your Mrs. Beeson, if you like, who likes everything to be neat and clean and normal. I'm not particularly not clean or neat. I am certainly not what anyone would call normal, but I am so good as anyone is. And very lonely, though Grover, he murmured a few more polite words and made his exit, trotting down the gravel drive and heading home with a great sense of relief. Grover couldn't sleep that night. Thoughts swarmed through his mind. He couldn't shut them off, so he got up, being quiet, and he wouldn't wake his brother. He put his cloth and went outside. He would take a short, fast walk just up to the hill to the main street, down a few blocks and back home. He had done it before when he couldn't sleep, and it usually helped. He wasn't afraid. There was nothing in the Yarnwood that couldn't hurt him, unless the terrorist was roaming around the town again, as if he was Grover, would catch him for some safe place and see what he was up to turn him in. That thought was invigorating. Grover started off. He climbed the hill at a rapid pace, breathing in a cold night air, looking up at the star, wondering why he didn't do this more often. Being out alone at the night made him feel free. He went up the Trollian Street, around behind the Cause's corner, no terrorists there tonight, and down the main street, where the street lamps were out, as they were all over the town. He saw nothing stirring, not a night watchman or an alley, a cat or even a spider, until as he passed the dark windows of to the grocery store, he happened to glance up Grackle Street and saw something one about a back block away. Whoever it was didn't walk purposely but drifted a little this way, a little that way, as if lost or looking for something. Was it Sleepwalker? Grover stood and started. He was too far away to be sure who was seeing, but suddenly he thought he knew. It must be her. It was a right street. Why would she be outside? She seems to be wearing what? A nightgown, something pale and floaty. He started in that direction, but before he had gone more than a few steps, another figure appeared, a skinny girl who dashed up behind the lost looking one and looked at her arm and led her back into the house. Grover turned downhill and headed for the home. What he had seen had given him a sad, shaky feeling. Poor Prohit, he thought. It might be an awful to have a god speak to you and turn your mind to the ashes. Short red hair, blue envelopes. Nicky woke on Tuesday morning to the sound of rain roaring on the roof and slatting against the window glass, coming into the guest as the wind blew one way and then the another. It was a sort of a day when you want to stay inside, make a fire and sit by it with your lap cup of hot chocolate. But of course, Nicky had given up the hot chocolates, so she drank a mint tea that morning instead. She actually felt very quite victorious doing it because it was so hard. She could tell that her willpower was being exercised like a muscle. This didn't make her happy exactly. She missed the chocolate, but it made feel her strong. Could it be that the more thing you gave up, the stronger you would feel? Crystal went out yearly to talk with Erlene about the plans for the open houses. Meet me at the caf at 6, she said, and she went out the door. We will have a dinner together, and you can tell me about what is your adventure. Otto's outing was very short that morning. He stood up on the threshold of a back door and looked out doubtfully at the rain. Nicky had to push him outside. Once there, did he his dust in the record time and dashed back in. Nicky took him in the upstairs. The nursery room was especially gauzy than the morning, with the sky so dark outside and the sound of an rain on the windows and the pools of an golden light from the lamps. Nicky set an Otis up and on the window seat and gave him a new bone to chew. She propped up some cushions to lean against, and then she looked around for something to read. Her eyes fell on the book that Amanda had left behind. Why not try one of these? She picked the one with the dark Harriet beauty on the cover and opened it random. In the candlelight, Blanny eyed glittered like the jewel. Clarissa caught her breath as he leaned towards her. What a magnificent man he was! His square jaws, his thick, glossy black hair, his wide shoulders, her heart racked. When he reached out and stroked her cheeks, she trembled all over. Blanny, she said, you must never leave me. I want to be with you always. Nicky raised her eyes to the rain-spattered window. She tried to imagine feeling this way about someone. First she pictured was Martin, with his hazel eyes and short red hair. Did she think that he was magnified? Not really. He seems nice, and he was on the side of an goodness, but he didn't make her heart race. She pictured Grover instead. His hair was cute in a floppy sort of an way. He was smart and interesting. He had a sense of humor, if you like that kind of an humor, but he was also a bit peculiar. She had no idea if he was on the side of an goodness or not, and she certainly wouldn't say that he was magnified. If he stroked her cheeks, could her heart race? No, she would think it was weird and creepy. Did she want to be with him always? Definitely not. It was hard to imagine waiting to be with anyone always. There would be the times when you want to be alone or with someone else. She turned a few pages and read some more. Crasilla fell down the some step to the window-swept beach. Here the raven trees following out behind her. She scanned the empty sands, and when she saw no sign of an blinds, a great cry of an onish escaped her lips. She could not live without him. She would sooner die. Nicky shut the book. There was no doubt about it. It was her love. She was not in love with Martin or Grover. She could live without either of them perfectly well. She soaked out the window where the water was still pelting down. At the end of an block, she noticed someone approaching wearing a white, brinket pink rain hat and carrying a canvas tote bag. When the person came closer, she saw who it was, Mrs. Beeson. How perfect! If she ran fast downstairs, she could catch her and ask her what happened to the horrible haughty Matthew. She didn't bother to grab an umbrella. She just threw on her jacket and ran out in the rain. Rivers of water streamed through the gutter. All along the street, bare trees branched failed against the house walls and shut tight the windows. She ran to meet Mrs. Beeson, who smiled when she saw Nicky coming. "Hi," said Nicky. "I saw you from the windows, and I was wondering. I was just thinking of you," Mrs. Beeson said. She looked a little frazzled around the edges. Her lipstick was slightly crooked, and her ponytail beneath the rain hat was damp and drooping. "You have been such an help. Walk with me, if you would like. I am delivering a few notice." "Notice," said Nicky. "Thank you."